So we're going to be looking at how to get movement. In this app, you'll see basically this is what we're creating. We're going to have an icon that moves around the screen. It bounces off the sides of the screen. And when you click on it, it goes to a new random location and heads off in the opposite direction. So we're going to start this from scratch. So just create a new app lab. And to keep this simple and really just focus on how to get that movement happening, we're just going to have one icon. So I'm going to pull in an image. I'm going to choose an image. And I had a cat on mine. I'm just going to see if I can find, I don't know, some sort of cat alien type thing. And I'm going to use that one, but it really does not matter what you use. So I'm going to make it size 50 in each direction. And I'm just going to put it here in the middle of the screen, although we are going to set it to a random location to start. So I'm going to go to my code now. And the first thing that we're going to work on is just getting it moving. We'll do the random location a little bit later. So movement or continuous movement, just like anything continuous in computer programming, is really an illusion. We move at discrete values. So basically, we're going to move it a little bit with a timed loop. So I'm going to take out a time loop. If I move it once a second, it will look choppy. So I'm going to use 20, which is basically, 1,000 divided by 50 is 20. So it'll move 50 times a second. Now, in order to move, I have to get the position and add something to it. So just so I don't have to worry about dealing with local variables, because this is a function, so they will be local, I'm going to define the position of the cat, declare variables for the position of the cat above that time loop. So this, I'm going to call it xcat and ycat because position is defined by an x and a y value. So every 20 milliseconds, I'm going to store the current position of the cat, the x and y values, so I can go to my UI controls and get the position. So there's a get x position and a get y position. I'm going to go back here and I'm just going to name this cat image. Right now it's the only element I have, but later we might be adding to it, so it's just good to name things. So I'm going to go back and forth a little more with this one just to speed it up. And we are going to see, let me just check one thing. I just want to make sure I'm still recording. Okay, good. I just can't see it when I'm on the screen. So basically, I'm going to copy it and paste it, and I'm going to call this ycat and get y position. I go back to blocks now. So I've gotten the position. And then basically, I'm going to set some sort of velocity to start. Now, if you think about it, this velocity is going to be kind of constant until we hit a wall. I'm not even going to worry about the walls yet. So I'm actually going to define variables up here for the x and y velocity of the cat. So this is x cat or x vel cat. I just want to keep it. So the x velocity of the cat and the y velocity of the cat. And we're going to set them just to 2 to start. Okay. So we have some sort of velocity, and to get it to move, we're going to add the position to what we're calling the velocity, which is really just a movement over in the x or y direction. I could use the same variable right now because these two both have the same value of 2, but later they will change and we'll see that. So I'm going to keep them as separate variables. So now we're going to set the position. Of the cat image. I don't need to change its size, so we can actually get rid of these last 2 values. And in here, just because this is new, I'm going to pull out an adding block. And I'm going to add the current position of the cat to what I want its velocity to be. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Sorry for the text message from my mother. So now I have the position. So we'll just see what happens. Every 20 milliseconds, it should move it over to basically positive is going to be to the right and down is positive. So if I run this, we see it moving down, but unfortunately we have nothing to stop it. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to create some sort of way to check when it's here, and when it's there, it's going to bounce off the side and it's going to appear to bounce, but really we're just going to negate its velocity in that direction. So I am going to create a function out of this. Okay. And then from there, but first I'm going to keep it in just so we can see. So we're going to get the position and we're going to set up different conditions. So I'm going to write if the xcat is less than or equal to 0. So if I'm all the way over here on the left side of the screen, then we're going to have to multiply the x velocity instead of going -2. You know what? We'll start over here. We'll start at 320 over here because that'll make a little more sense because it's moving to the right first. So I'm going to take this one out. If it's greater than or equal to 320, okay, then I'm going to take the x velocity of the cat and I'm going to multiply it. So I'm going to go over to text mode. We can do times equals -1. So that'll bounce it in the opposite direction. So let's just run that to see what happens, because the first thing that happened with the way I currently have it, I'm going to get rid of this else right now, is that it should bounce off the right side. So let's just run it. Okay, so I do see it bounced. Now this is 320, but it's measuring from this side of it. So I've already played around with this and I've found that 280 works well to kind of look like it's really bouncing. So you would just play around with the numbers, figure out what looks the best so we can see it bounces. So we're going to create these boundaries in each direction. I could combine and make a Boolean statement with an and here, but I'm going to do each part separate. So I'm just going to create a couple of conditions. I'm going to change this one over to else if, and then I'm going to type them in. So we're also kind of getting used to typing. So I would do if the xcat, this is going to the left, is less than, and I would do 0, but -10 actually looks the best. Then I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to multiply the x velocity by -1. So it's basically going to bounce it back, basically just changing the direction of the x. So my next one is the y-cat. So I'm going to do down first. And the down here is 450, but I found that 410 kind of looks the best. And then I'll do the same thing, but I'm going to do y velocity times -1. So that'll send it in the other direction. And then basically I'm going to take this whole thing and copy it. And I'm actually going to replace this one. So I'm going to do if the y-cat in the opposite direction is less than or equal to -10. So if it's going towards the top, then we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to show the blocks now just to see the full thing, but basically I've just built this conditional so that it's moving, but it should bounce in the opposite direction. Okay, so you can see that that's working pretty well. Now, because this is a little complicated, I am going to make a function out of it. So I'm going to call this, put it up here, check boundaries. And just take this conditional statement and put it in there. And then I'm going to call that function right here, just so it's a little cleaner to look at this time loop. So if I run it, I just want to make sure it still does the same thing. And it looks pretty good. Okay, so the only thing we really have to set up now is we have to set up moving it to a random location. So when I click on it, I want to move it to a random location. I'm actually going to set up a function for the random location. I'm going to put that up here. And I'm going to use a parameter. I'm going to say sprite. Now, sprite is just a name that we give to like characters in a game, just a name that's often used. Now, I'm just going to pick a random number for the x. Now, this can be a local variable because I'm only really going to pick an x to move this thing to. It's not the actual x it has now. And I'm going to use a random number. I could play around for x. I want to go between 0 and 320, but 20 and 280 kind of keeps it from being off the screen. I'm looking a little weird. I'm going to do the same thing for y. So I'm just going to copy this. We'll do y, and remember that's a little longer than it is across, so we're going to do 20 to 390. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the position of the sprite to x and y. So I go to my UI controls, we'll find our set position. We also are not changing its size, so I'm going to get rid of those last two parameters. Those two arguments, I guess we would say, because we're calling the function. And I'm going to change this to the cat image. And actually, I'm not going to do the cat image. I take that back. We're going to do a sprite. The reason I'm making this a function with a parameter is so I could set a random position for anything. So if I put another character on here, then I could set that too by calling the function for that particular element. So we're going to set this to x and y. Now I'm just going to put some space in here so we can see things a little better. So there's my variable definitions. Here is my first function and my second function, and then here is my times loop. So I am actually going to call my random location function when we first start, because I want it to start, when I run it, I want it to kind of go to a different spot each time. So we're going to do this for cat image. So right now, I have my random location function, I have my check boundaries function, I'm calling my random location function, and then I'm running my time loop. So when I press run, it should go to different spots on the screen, and we saw that. Now I can't click on it yet, but we can see it's still working. It doesn't do anything. So really all I have to do is do an event handler for clicking on this. So I'm going to pull one of those out, put that at the bottom. And I did not mean to put it in my time loop, so we'll move it down. And when I click on the cat image, I'm going to call this random location function. We're going to put the cat to a new location. So we have, this is the first time we set it, and this is after that. The other thing I want to do is I want to send it in the opposite direction. So I'm actually going to copy this line of code. So I'm going to put it, kind of just looks better to send it in a different direction. So we're going to do this to the x and y velocity, so it should head in the opposite direction. So now, if I click on it, it goes to a new location. We see it heading in the other direction, bouncing off the walls correctly, and that is this app. I would give it a name. I call this automatic movement. We're also going to see how to use keys to move different things.